All right, everybody, welcome, welcome, welcome. We'll give everyone a few minutes to get settled in here. We got a big live today. There's so much stuff to cover. Holy cow. We are in, as the left is saying, a constitutional crisis. I'll get into that in just a minute. Kind of laughable scenario there from the constant town criers. But let me make sure that we are live. And yep, we are. We are live. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started here. So welcome everybody to the Rice Report. I am Eric Rice. Thank you so much for being here. This is just a nice little live here to go through a bunch of things that are happening financially. As you know, we normally cover the three topics you're never supposed to talk about in public or with other people, which is money, politics, and religion. Today, we're going to have a very strong focus on the economic markets, the financial markets where we are right now, specifically in the gold market, which is always the canary in the coal mine, kind of telling us what's coming down the road and down the pike. And I think it's just important that we all have a basic understanding or a grasp on the situation that's at hand right now. So let's go ahead and get started and dig in. Normally, I start with government debt. You all know how much government debt we have by now. It's been many, many years of covering this stuff with you. But I think it's important to note that DOGE, the entire DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency, is really bringing to light where this money has gone. And I know that there's a lot of people out there who keep saying, well, DOGE is going to uncover all this excess spending and fraud and waste and all that, which is amazing. That's not generally paid for by taxpayer dollars. That's generally paid for by money printing. So that's not really going to chip away at the deficit. It'll certainly help. It's a great start. But I think what we're going to find out is that this is just the tip of the iceberg. Now that we know that $20 million is going to Sesame Street in Pakistan or Iran or wherever it may be, now we're going to try to find out how many times it aired. Did we get our money's worth? And I think what we're going to find out primarily from USAID is that most of this money has been shielded, offshored, hidden, rat-holed all throughout the world. And it's just wound up in the pockets of wealthy people to begin with. So that is really the kind of the tip of the iceberg. I know that everyone wants to speed forward and get this thing over with, but I can tell you right now that what DOGE is doing in the market is, number one, needed. We need clarity. We need transparency around what's happening with government funds. Considering our government is the largest employer in the world, the largest companies in the world are generally public, and they have a full audit every quarter, if not every year. And we've never really audited the entire government. We've definitely never audited the Fed, which is not part of the government. It's a private corporation. But I think if we look at this from the right lens, number one, it's very freeing in certain aspects just to understand that our money has gone somewhere. We don't know where it's gone. And primarily, this is a horrible thing for any nation around the world to not know where their money is going. For any citizen around here who's paying taxes, which many people are now starting to question that. Should we be paying taxes for a government that spends money like this? And I'm not here to start any quarrels or arguments. You can do what you like, but I know that there are many people around this country that are not satisfied and that will not be participating in that come April. And I think that's something everyone should evaluate because that is really our only position of power. So it is nice watching DOGE open up the doors on USAID. The Treasury is coming up, the Department of Justice, FEMA, the Federal Reserve. If we can get that pulled off, that's going to be an act of Congress to have that happen. But I want to get kind of hit the brakes on everything while we're in the middle of this avalanche of information that's coming out. An executive order is a mandate from the government to have Congress look into changing laws. So there are certain EOs that will take place on policy and procedure. The way things are done, those will be implemented. Just had a chance to speak with the gentleman from the Border Patrol, and there are plenty of changes that an executive order mandates and corrects immediately. But primarily, these things are basically an offering to Congress to say, here's something I, as the president, am interested in changing, and I want you to start working on it. And the good news is that right now, the politicians we have in D.C. are actually putting these things into formalized bills and getting ready to present them to Congress. Specific things like Greenland, changing it to red, white, and blue land, which I think is funny. The acquisition of Greenland, that's one thing that we have out there. The abolishing of the IRS and the federal tax rate. Obviously, I'm for that. If you followed me for more than 10 minutes, you realize how much I hate taxes and being stolen from by a government who cares very little about us. But I think that as we go through this, it's important to have a proper mindset. Executive orders can only do so much. We shouldn't want a president to rule the nation by executive order because that makes him nothing more than a king with decrees. So we have to be a little patient on some of the bigger topics when it comes to taxes, and even tariffs those will be implemented, but there will certainly be a debate. And I am looking forward to the day when our conservative leaders go to Congress and say, let's get rid of the income tax. As I said in my last live, I think we're approaching the era of the sovereign individual, where we see a heavy influence of digital currency, tariffs to protect the nation in a time of protectionism, and tariffs, high tariffs for imports, always correlate with a drop or an elimination of taxes. And that haven of wealth, of freedom, should draw in innovative minds from around the world to create more innovations in this country and make this country even better. However, that's going to come with tremendous pain. And if you're in business right now, you're feeling that pain. There is a very distinct mood in the capital raising area, in venture capital and private equity, all the things that fund a lot of the companies that you buy products from or hire for services. There's a really big pullback in that market, and I'm experiencing it right now raising capital. Is that there's a lot of tight pockets. There's a lot of concerns about liquidity. There's a lot of concerns right now about uncertainty. And we are certainly dealing in an area that we've never been in before. So uncertainty is a very, very simple thing to absorb and understand. We are going into uncharted waters. And that is a scary thing all around. So while everyone is excited about Trump, and I'm excited about Trump and what he's doing for this country, understand that it's going to come with some heavy hands along the way. It's going to come with some very, very distinct issues. I see a very rocky road ahead for us financially for the near term. But the long term couldn't be brighter as long as we can get some of these things, through Congress, which I think we're going to be able to, because we're working right now on Kash Patel, Tulsi Gabbard, and RFK Jr. and their final confirmations. We're still waiting on confirmations. You are watching Democrats at play in the way that they play political games to keep people from getting the team assembled that we need in order to make instant and positive, long-lasting change. And I think that's a big part of what's happening right now with uncertainty is, are these changes going to be temporary? Are they going to be instant? Do they take a while? Will they be permanent? Do they fade away with the next president? I don't have any answers to those questions. But I think they're great questions to keep on your top of your mind and to continue to focus on in your daily life. So let's go through some of the things that we're seeing right now. So again, USAID completely blown open. I can't wait for the Treasury. One thing about the Treasury I want to bring up is that Donald Trump made a specific comment, two comments. He said, there may be something nefarious happening at the Treasury. And I think if you've lived long enough in America that you probably aren't suspicious of this. I'm more than confident something shady is going on there when you have places like Citadel involved. But Trump said that we may have less debt than we realize. And that brings up many different things in my head. What could it be? Could they be rehypothecating treasuries, taking in double payments for treasuries? These are the kind of things that Bitcoin and blockchain hope to resolve. This double spend issue, we see that a lot in USAID. But this correlates directly with the uncertainty in the market from tariffs. Now, the tariff situation to date has been fairly laughable, but I think it's important to note that based on tariffs rates all throughout the world, the United States is really at the bottom. There is nobody who tariffs less than the United States. So the mere fact that Democrats right now, based on tariffs and Doge, are claiming a constitutional crisis, and that's literally the word they're saying. This is the new PSYOP. So if you're wondering what the new mass psychosis, psychological operation is going to be on the American people, it's going to be the term constitutional crisis, because Doge is uncovering wasteful and fraudulent spending. At the same time, Trump is putting his foot down with foreign leaders to get get the country the amount of money that we actually deserve for the products that we export, and making people pay to import them here and hurt American jobs. So here you have one side of the political aisle that wants to make America great again. You have another side of the aisle that wants to keep America exactly as it is, a fraudulent waste hole for money laundering and extortion. And the PSYOP that they're using right now through the mass media is a constitutional crisis. Now you have the Democrats saying, shut the government down. If you remember, not even 6 months ago, they were screaming, we need more money to keep the government open. How can we run a country if we don't have a government? Now the Democrats on the other side of the table, they're saying that if we continue with Doge and we continue with tariffs, we're going to need to shut the government down to reevaluate our stance. This is exactly as predicted by many people for many, many years right now when this type of information was disclosed to the American people, which it finally is in small doses. Now, another PSYOP on top of the constitutional crisis, which I'll get back to, is the Doge big balls, right? Like, kind of the funniest thing that's happened yet is the story we're told is, 5, 19, and 20-something-year-old kids came in, got access to government computers, and laid out all this information beautifully, visually, perfectly organized in a few days. I just don't buy into that. I hope it's a great story. I hope it is. It's very, very similar to our founding fathers, who are all either 30 or under. But I think that information has been well known for a very long time, and I think they're just now declassing it or disclosing it to the general public. So don't want to rain on your parade with that. I don't know if that's accurate or not. It could totally be a legitimate story that they hacked in, but that's a lot of data to comb through over many, many years, decades. And to be able to organize that information and put it in play, even with AI, that's a very daunting task. So it doesn't matter to me one way or the other, whether or not they were actually hacking the system and finding the information or they had it beforehand. The fact of the matter is America needed to hear this, and we're starting to heal from it. Now, going back to the constitutional crisis, this topic is very important. You are going to hear constitutional crisis ad nauseum for the next probably 6 to 8 weeks until something is resolved. We've been in a constitutional crisis since COVID, period. There is no discussion about this. COVID was a violation of multiple constitutional rights that were put in the hands of states who continued to violate your constitutional rights as an American. It got further along with the rigged election of 2020. And I don't care if I get banned from YouTube for saying that. That election was completely rigged. We had a false president in office for 4 years, whoever that guy was, and who now has a contract with CAA to do acting, I guess, at this point in time. But we've been in a constitutional crisis for 5 years. So the fact that Democrats are now acknowledging that we're in a constitutional crisis, I also consider to be a major victory. This is the sleepy half of the country that just wants things to remain status quo, keep stealing money, keep hiking taxes, keep raising interest rates, keep inflation running high. They don't care as long as they can, get the liberal agenda put into place. So you'll hear this constitutional crisis phrase over and over again, but just to understand that we have been in a constitutional crisis literally since COVID, and it hasn't really stopped. Now, today we had some information, again, Trump talking about the treasuries. We also found out the Treasury Department through Doge has never been able to decline a payment. Now, imagine being a payment processor with the government and not having a no or a let's question this payment to a foreign leader, to a terrorist group, to just bad people around the globe. They have not been able to decline a payment in over 10 years, and God knows how much money has been filtered out of this country into the wrong hands during that period of time. These are certainly issues that this country is finally waking up to, that people like me and people who've known this stuff for 8 to 10 years, people have known this stuff for 50 or 60 years and been screaming from the mountaintops and no one's listened. Finally, we're in a position where America may listen because they're starting to see proof and evidence coming from their quote-unquote trusted sources. This is something we need to pay attention to and really, really harness and really help usher in. Just that understanding that things are not as they appear, and the fact that they don't appear that way is the problem. So now I'm starting to see people open their eyes, and the Treasury is a big part of that stuff. And I think we're going to find out that a lot of our U.S. Treasuries have been rehypothecated and that they've been sold multiple times to the same or multiple buyers, kind of like you would do in any basic fraud, that we've defrauded other people, other nations, other private buyers, other institutions around the world. I'm not making that accusation. I have no evidence to say that, but it wouldn't be out of the realm of understanding how this government works that they have been doing something with our debt, running up our debt, making it easier to tax us, because that's been the story since I was a kid is, well, how do we build roads if we don't pay federal taxes? Federal taxes never went to roads. They never have. That's their state taxes. And even those allocations need to be looked at too. So we'll look at the federal government. Hopefully the states will do the same thing voluntarily without having a Doge type model to break them down. But we also just heard Jerome Powell today say a couple of things that were good. One was good, I guess. One was a little obtuse or a little vague for me. Jerome Powell made two big statements today. Number one, he said he does not endorse a CBDC. I think that's a great thing. We shouldn't have a central bank digital currency. But I will advise you in the coming weeks, I'll be out for a few days on some business stuff, but I'll be doing a breakdown next week of a lot of the basics of crypto, understanding what things are, how they work, who's who, what's what. And I think you'll be very interested in that because it's going to be very remedial. It's not going to be very high level. A lot of these podcasts out there assume you already understand what these things mean when they talk about them. And we're going to try to take bits and pieces of podcasts and break down and explain to normal people what that stuff means. Because whether you like it or not, a digital economy is on its way. It's going to be here in less than 2 years if I estimate it correctly. We still have a long way to go to develop, regulations, laws, standards, rules, things like that. That is going to take, I think, the better part of maybe 7 or 8 months to get that down. And then you're going to have multiple years of implementation to see that stuff really change. I mean, it's going to be very difficult for people who pay in cash to learn how to move money on a cold or a hot wallet. And even understanding what those two terms are is going to be a big learning curve for a lot of America. So I hope to help with that a little bit in the coming weeks. But him saying that we're not going to do a CBDC, I've known that for a long time. We're very against a CBDC here in this country. But I think what we're missing is the fact that we are going to be launching corporate stablecoins, which are really no different than a CBDC. The only difference is it's being issued by the government and not by a private Western central bank. That's really the difference between a stablecoin and a CBDC. They are both par value $1 instruments, meaning that the purpose of a CBDC or a stablecoin is to remain at $1, which can be fractionalized into pennies, which we're no longer minting anymore, finally. They are not taking pennies out of circulation. You'll still have change at the grocery store or wherever you go, but we are no longer minting pennies because it costs 3.5 cents to make a 1 cent penny. So no reason to do that anymore. Everything will be fractionalized digitally. But a stable coin is really no different than a CBDC. They are both backed by the dollar, backed by the Treasury. They are completely influenced. They are centralized instruments of money to move them around digitally. And I think it's a good thing to maintain the global reserve currency status by using stable coins backed by treasuries and US dollars to get that type of digital currency into areas of the world that never had it before, so they have better buying power. You got to remember, to date, there is no stronger buying power in common usage than the US dollar. So there's a lot of doom and gloomers around the dollar. I've never thought the dollar is going away at any point in time. I do think the dollar will see a significant drop in value at some point in time. And I think that's part of a big economic plan, very similar to the Plaza Accord from the 1980s. I think we're going to see, people have been paraphrasing it as the Mar-a-Lago Accord. And the meetings have already kind of been set up before Trump was even president. I'll get into that in just a moment. But no CBDC, but we are going to have a DC, which is going to be in the form of stable coins issued by private corporations backed by the US dollar and by treasuries. So these are really no different. We don't really know how they're programmed on the back end. It just won't be controlled by the central bank. It'll be controlled primarily by the Treasury, which is kind of like going from 10, if 10 was the highest, worst possible way to manage your money in a highly controlled, centralized environment, a CBDC would be a 10 out of 10, a government-issued stablecoin, 9 out of 10, a corporate-issued stablecoin backed by U.S. treasuries and dollars, probably an 8 out of 10. So we have lowered that amount of constriction, but make no mistake, stablecoins can be frozen at any time. They can be confiscated at any time. You still have that mentality behind it of a CBDC, although it's not called a central bank digital currency. But it is becoming more obvious to me and to many people around the world. I was interviewing people in 2022 at Freedom Fest in Memphis about shifting from a unipolar to a multipolar world. And for those of you who don't know what that means, we live in a unipolar world where basically the United States, the dollar, we dominate all economies throughout the world. What we're moving into is self-sovereignty, an area where Russia will control its finance, where India, all these other countries, they want to take control of their own buying power, and that is going to take time. While the BRICS nations have been a big buzzword around the internet, the BRICS nations have also said they're stockpiling gold. They plan on using digital M-bridge technology to make payments back and forth, or bridge technology as they call it today. But they are also working on a currency years out. So I think there's a lot of closed door negotiations going on right now. Trump has said if they ditch the dollar, he'll tariff them 100%. I don't rule that out. That could certainly happen. We are living in very uncertain times, and I'm not sitting here with any certainty. I'm just a guy in a hoodie in a guest bedroom talking to you. But I think that we have this really good opportunity to understand a little more about the economies of scale and what they mean. Now, Jerome Powell also said another thing today that I believe to be complete hogwash. He said that he will not be doing quantitative easing or money printing until we see 0% interest rates again. Now, I'll remind you, at the beginning of Trump's 2016 journey into the White House, he said that his goal was to weaken the dollar. Weakening the dollar during that time frame allowed us to really get money. I mean, our number one export in America is the dollar. That is the number one thing that we export more than anything else of value in this country, is the US dollar. And weakening it allows other economies to build up so they can afford American goods. You got to understand the way that currencies work around the world. The stronger the US dollar is, it's compared to all the other currencies. So while the US dollar is trading at 108 or 109 on the Dixie right now, every other currency around the world is trading 30-40% below its value. I talked to a friend of mine who has relatives in Russia, and they were saying that right now Russia's in a pretty tough spot because the ruble is so far devalued below the US dollar. So they're trying to find ways to get dollars to improve their own buying power. Nations like El Salvador, they offer Bitcoin as a payment. It's no longer legal tender there because they took a loan, but it's still being used by about 8.5% of the country, which is about 600 to 800,000 people on a daily basis. But they actually have US dollars. So they're not running on their own currency. They're running on US dollars. And there's definitely a coalition between El Salvador and the United States, President Bukele and President Trump. Marco Rubio's been down there. We now are doing our MS-13 gang members that hopefully Tom Homan will be getting out of here quickly if they stop leaking on him. They'll be going to El Salvador, to those prisons. We've cut a nuclear deal with them to build nuclear power in El Salvador. El Salvador is really one of those countries to watch. It's a proxy nation is what I call it. And you will see the change that will ultimately be implemented in large countries through these proxy nations, which are kind of like alpha or beta testing of a new idea or a new financial system. But Jerome Powell saying that we're not going to do quantitative easing until we see 0% interest rates kind of falls directly in line with what Donald Trump had said this term in office, where he basically said that at 0%, he wants to lower interest rates, and that will do a few things. That'll stimulate manufacturing in this country and create self-sovereignty. So we'll have this opportunity in the country to be able to get cheaper rates, to be able to borrow money to produce our own goods, which will create independence and sovereignty and more profit. And at the same time, that'll come with a weakened dollar. So every time we raise rates, we're pulling money out of cash out of the system. Every time we lower them, we're easing, we're quantitative easing, we're printing money. So him saying at 0% is in my opinion, a political play. Our central bank is no longer independent. It is a complete political bastion, whether depending on who's in power. I believe Trump appointed Powell, so I think this is kind of the political banter that we'll see. I think it's unavoidable that we print by the end of the year, regardless of what any economist will tell you. Just looking at some of the things we have to do, there's about $11.3 trillion in old debt that's maturing, 10-year notes that are maturing that we have to roll over. And one of those instances occurred today. $66 billion in U.S. 10-year Treasury notes was paying 2%. That just matured out. We had to refinance that into another 10-year note at 4.55%. So think of government debt like you would your mortgage. So right now we just had a 10-year mortgage that we didn't pay off. We have to at 2%. We have to refinance the house now at 4.55%. Just that basket of $66 billion will create $1.67 billion a year in interest cost. So that's $66 billion out of $11.3 trillion that will have to be refinanced in the year 2025. These are unavoidable issues that the Federal Reserve and the Treasury face right now, and it's not going to be pretty. I don't care what anyone says, it's not going to be pretty. Trump and Bessent have to focus in on that 10-year number. That is the long, it's not a T-bill, it's not short-term, it's a long-term loan for the United States, and they want to be able to keep that number under 5%. So we just refinanced $66 billion at 4.55%. That's up from 2%. So if you look at that from a holistic standpoint, you're going to have liquidity issues. As you're starting to see, the reverse repo market is as low as it's been in 1,300 days. That is a haven for liquidity using U.S. Treasuries. So banks can give their treasuries up, get cash into the system, operate their business, buy back their treasuries at a later date. This area of the world is one that very few people talk about, but it's a big indicator of liquidity. And that liquidity in that pool is drying up. So one of two things is going to have to happen. Either quantitative easing will happen, despite what Powell said, at higher interest rates, or they're going to disguise it in new programs. They're going to give them new names, which is quantitative easing with a new label. Right, so we had the, I think it was the Treasury buyback program that ran for 9 months. That was just another way of printing money to provide liquidity to the banks. Our banks are in really difficult spots right now. I think we're approaching an era where we may see one or two mid-sized banks either fold or go into Chapter 11 restructuring. This stuff will all kind of unfold in the next 18 months. I have no idea when. But when that does happen, we will need liquidity, and that's when the printer gets turned on again, because when you have fiat by decree money that's printed out of thin air, the easiest way to solve your problems is just print them away. So I think by the end of the year, we'll see some heavy printing there. I think it'll be pretty tight on a liquidity basis in between there. And really the big part of this that's telling the story is gold. Gold is always, it's a fascinating asset class. I believe Obama called it a barbarous relic. Pretty much anything Obama or anyone from the IMF, the BIS, the WEF, anything they talk about and tout is terrible for you, good for them. And they've been downplaying gold for a long time. China has amplified its buying by about 150% in the last 30 days. They are buying gold like crazy. China actually advocates that their citizens hold physical gold. We're really the only country in the world that doesn't advocate that. India has stepped up their gold and silver purchases pretty significantly. And this is all correlating with Doge. So I'm going to tie something together here that many people probably haven't. But we are starting to see a mini run, and I'm not calling it a gold run, but our gold market is screwed up. It always has been. The gold market by itself is basically big repositories, the COMEX and out in London, these different areas. They just hold massive amounts of other people's gold. They keep it in storage. It's highly secure, very safe. Don't worry about that. But what happens is they then create a paper market. And the paper market right now is basically selling 300 ounces of paper for every 1 ounce of gold. And this has been well known by gold bugs for many, many years, but we're approaching a period in history where it may actually start to be exposed. And when it gets exposed in a really big way. So right now in London, they have already delivered $134 billion of physical gold to American gold holders. This means a few things. Number one, people are concerned about liquidity and they need hard assets. So the way this works, if you're not familiar with gold, you can buy gold on the stock exchanges. You can buy the paper gold that's been manipulated and proven to be manipulated, as evidenced by J.P. Morgan bankers being thrown in jail for manipulating the gold and silver market through paper trading. So this isn't a conspiracy theory anymore. There actually have been people who went to jail 2 years ago for this, and it hasn't stopped. All they've done is imprison people. They haven't actually fixed the system. But the way it works is, say you're a $1 million gold buyer. And that's not many of us, right? So it's not buying $1 million in gold. But if you're a $1 million gold buyer, the last thing you want to do is go out and buy gold and hold $1 million of gold in your house that someone could steal very easily. So what happens is these gold buyers buy and they send it off to the COMEX, or they send it off to the COMEX to be sold. Either way, these are clearinghouses. These are places that hold on to other people's gold and distribute them when they call upon them, and they charge a fee for this. So, and it's not just the COMEX, there's many other places that are having big runs, private repositories and banks. But banks right now are recalling a lot of their gold from these centralized storage facilities. And we are seeing 1 to 2 month lag time on delivery. So imagine you have $1 million in gold with the COMEX. You're like, hey, I'm not going to sell it. I want you to deliver it to me and I'll store it myself. And they tell you, great, no problem, Eric. What we'll do is we'll get it to you in like a month or two. This is a story that has been propagated for many years by gold bugs that's actually coming true. And I'm one of them. I've been telling the story for a long time. The reality is it doesn't take 1 to 2 months to deliver someone's gold. The reality is there's not enough gold there. So what they're doing is they're actually buying themselves time to go buy physical gold in the open market to deliver it to their customers. This is happening. They're trying to offset this by making it more expensive to borrow. So if you want to borrow gold or borrow silver, the rates for doing that have gone up 3 or 4x in the last 2 weeks. This is what I term a mini run. Now, ultimately, I think we'll get to a point in a liquidity crisis where gold will all be reclaimed. And we will find out very quickly that these gold storage facilities, the COMEX and some of these other places, just simply don't have the gold. And then you're going to have real problems in the market. So the gold story always tells you liquidity issues come, and more importantly, it's usually about a 10 to 12 month indicator on the next big print. So what we're watching right now is this waiting period of 10 to 12 months in between now and then, where the gold market will be exposed and more people will reclaim their physical ownership of gold. The gold markets won't have them. They'll have to spend a premium to go buy it in the market, which will drive up the spot price of gold tremendously, maybe $1,000 or $2,000 an ounce. And it brings up other issues. One that people are talking about, that I've been talking about literally for about 12 years now, is how simple it would be for the United States government to get out of debt is by revaluing gold. This is also one of the problems with gold, by the way. So right now we have a bunch of gold sitting in the New York Fed right now. And it's not just our gold. There's gold from the BIS and the IMF that we're holding on to. We theoretically have gold in Fort Knox. That's a conspiracy theory that hasn't been proven true or false yet. So I will say my opinion is we do not have the gold that we claim to have at Fort Knox. I think we have 1 or 2 rooms filled of a gigantic facility. Just because everything else has been a fraud, why wouldn't gold be a fraud? Not claiming that I know that, but that's certainly more of a possibility than them having a massive amount of gold. Now, what happens is we have a valuation point held at the Treasury where we can basically say we can revalue gold to any price that we want to take care of the debt. Now, it sounds exciting to people with gold, but it's actually scary because it's a very centralized control mechanism. Revaluing the gold in the Treasury that we have right now can help with the debt. We're almost 37 trillion in debt. And we have basically about $650 to $680 billion in gold currently, but that gold is valued on the books at about $42 an ounce. Now, we did this before, I think in 1973, in the 1970s. They revalued gold from $38 to $42, and that helped out with a lot of our national deficit at that point in time. Now, people oftentimes think since they revalue gold, they could revalue gold at any price they want. They could literally wake up, Trump could wake up tomorrow morning and say, revalue the gold that we have at $100,000 an ounce. And they'll have to do it. And that will help us balance our books. It's kind of like pumping up your own bank account with no real resource behind it. It's a very centralized control mechanism. That doesn't equate to spot price. Spot price is what you and I buy gold at. So if they revalue the gold in the Treasury to spot price from $42 to $2,900, that's going to actually take away about $2.5 trillion of national debt just by those gold holdings. Now, in order to pay off the debt, you have to sell the gold. So they could revalue gold, and this is talked about quite a bit online, and right now more than ever. So they could revalue gold at $20,000 an ounce. That would take out another $5 to $6 trillion of national debt. So you can see that revaluing gold is probably part of our strategy nationally to be able to get out of debt. But by no means is it the only solution. There are plenty of other things that we have to do, which is why you keep hearing about the Plaza Accord and the Mar-a-Lago Accord. So if you don't know what the Plaza Accord is, it was a meeting of minds. 5 nations met at the Plaza Hotel in I think it was 1983. And they basically decided that what we're going to do to stimulate global growth, because you got to remember, I'm a bit of an isolationist. Which is what the Democrats would call a nationalist. I believe in taking care of America, America first, take care of our own borders. I believe in sovereignty and all these things, but that's not necessarily how the global order works. And we are still living in a very large global society. And I just explained, if our dollar is strong, everybody else's currency is very weak. And that makes their economies run inefficiently. And ultimately, it creates manufacturing problems, industrial problems, and it makes all the other economies, they all end up breaking down together, which is something we want to avoid, I think, from a government perspective. It needs to be done at some level, from a higher level. But in the 80s, they got together and basically made an agreement and said, yeah, we'll weaken the dollar for a period of time to stimulate manufacturing and growth in your countries. And that's what kind of built our global economy that we live in right now. Now, revaluing gold in that scenario was not discussed. It was just weakening the dollar. So I think we're going to see some sort of Mar-a-Lago Accord coming up because it just makes sense. We have to strengthen other economies and balance them around the world. In a global world, we are the world reserve currency. We do have that obligation. So I think that we will see some sort of weakening of the US dollar to export more dollars throughout the world, gain more market share of global currency, and at the same time help strengthen local currencies, local economies, so that a new rebalancing of global trade can take place. It's all about global trade. Now, I believe that nations should be nations like they were 500 years ago, where we had very limited import and export. It doesn't mean it's the way the world works or the way the world's going to work. It's just the way I would like it to work. But in a global economy, which we're certainly in and we're certainly going to be in for the rest of our lives, more than likely, we're going to a multipolar where different nations will have their own strengths and the ability to not be beholden to global trade if they choose not to. They're all going to choose to do it because there's a lot of money in import-export of pretty much every natural resource and every finished good. So we're certainly going to see that. I think that we'll see in the next 6 to 8 months is a lowering of interest rates. I think that there will be enough pressure on Powell, and our Federal Reserve is a political arm. So political pressure has worked. Remember, Jerome Powell also said that there's no way that he is going to lower rates, and 3 weeks later he lowered rates for Biden during the election. So what Powell says versus what he does are vastly different things from time to time, as any Fed chair has been throughout the course of our history. But I think that this period in time, we are going to see lower rates, a weaker dollar, money printing coming at the end of the year, which is great for things like gold and Bitcoin, those commodities, hard assets out there, silver as well, palladium, platinum, every precious metal. I think they'll all get a good boost at the end of the year. But this is all kind of symptomatic. I mean, we're seeing things we haven't seen before, like the venture capital arms of this nation. We are seeing what I call VC zombie corporations everywhere. If you look back 10 years ago, I'm from technology, and we've raised money. I've raised money from venture capital and PE most of my career. And these guys were kind of in control of the world. Like, you needed their blessing and their financing, and they had more financing than anyone. The venture capital arm of this country is running on fumes. We are seeing VC companies from the software era that are going out of business, that are failing. This is less stimulus into the U.S. economy. So if we don't have these private funding arms for corporations, we're going to need a weaker dollar and more dollar in the system. A devalued dollar also devalues debt. So if we devalue the debt, that makes that debt rollover or that refinancing of that $11 trillion in bonds much easier to do. It also opens up avenues for new lending for new businesses so that people can stimulate the economy, because the consumer side of what we're looking at is not good. Recent information came out from the Kabisi letter. I'll give them full credit for this. Recent numbers came out. The U.S. consumes 29% of the world's consumer goods, right? So 29% from our country. We produce 15%. China is the exact opposite. They consume 12% of global products and they produce 32% of them. This is what's called global imbalance. And the global imbalance is from a weak yen, strong dollar. You could give a million examples for what it could be. But what we are going to see eventually is some form of a light trade war to balance these two things out. We need to produce more and consume less. China needs to consume more and produce less. And we're going to see that economic war play out over the next probably 3 to 4 years, to be frank with you, until there's a resolution. But we look at consumer debt. This is one thing I talked about on an X Space the other day. We all talk about the Bretton Woods and removing the dollar from the gold standard in 1971, and then we talk about inflation. Well, during that time frame of the 1970s, we had very high inflation. We also had fairly decent interest rates. You could buy a home for 3x your earnings. So if you made $20,000 a year, a home was $60,000. It was very affordable. You didn't need 30 years to pay it off. One parent worked. Everyone was fine. They had 2 cars to drive the kids around. Then we saw this massive change when we went off the gold standard. But people oftentimes forget we went off the gold. This is a chronological breakdown. We went off the gold standard. Then we created consumer debt through revolving debt, credit card debt. And then we saw a massive spike in interest rates through the 1980s. But more importantly, that consumer debt created an even bigger problem for people, because not only was inflation at 15, 16, 17%, that was chewing away at their buying power of their dollar. So they now began to borrow for daily goods. Then you saw the 1980s, that whole era of consumerism and the cocaine era where buy everything, live your best life. We saw this massive influx of debt correlating with inflation and unsound money. So this problem goes back 50 years, very easily 50 years to the 1970s. And now we're seeing the real end game here for tyrants who would want to take over. I forgot who it was, but you don't conquer a nation with swords anymore. You conquer a nation through debt, and Americans are drowning in it. In December, we saw a $40.8 billion increase in credit, consumer credit, $40.8 billion. November was interesting. It was down 5.4. So in November, people were paying off debt. In December, Christmas time, debt soared $40.8 billion. $22.9 billion of that went to instant revolving debt, which is primarily credit card debt. So Americans went another $22.9 billion into revolving debt in December alone. The jobs market is not good. I have plenty of friends right now who are well overqualified for almost every job. They're having difficulty getting to third interviews or getting a job. Americans right now, they're feeling on how difficult it will be, or the likelihood of them getting a job, an unemployed American qualified for a job. Their sentiment dropped 50% on finding a job in the next 3 months. That is the largest drop since 2020. Job postings are now at the same level they were in 2020 on Indeed.com. More than half of the nation right now is wondering if they'll have to miss a debt payment in order to get food. That still hasn't changed. Uncovering the stuff at Doge is a great place to start, but eventually we'll start to see the solutions. We have to uncover the problems and then implement the solutions, which I believe have been designed for many, many years for this very moment in time. But the number of people in America who are stressing missing a debt payment in the next 3 months rose 14.2% in December. These are not good indicators of a strong economy moving forward, despite the fact that we have so much positive momentum. Now, natural gas, I think, is going to take a center stage in the next 18 to 24 months in this country, because we have AI, we have crypto, we have mining, we have quantum computing, all these other things coming into play, which will be normality in the next 2 to 3 years. This is an arms race for energy. Make no mistake, we are going to rebalance economies all throughout the world to create a level playing field globally, to spread the use of the dollar. You'll see things like Bitcoin emerge for international trade, which you're already seeing. and you'll see blockchain technologies come in and create transparency. That's going to happen. But at the end of the day, this is all reliant upon energy. As I said, we are structuring a nuclear energy deal with El Salvador right now. There are bills in Congress, locally in states, to build small reactor facilities. We have the small modular reactors that are coming out. Energy is the name of the game, and I think that at the end of 2025, early 2026, natural gas is going to be first and foremost. I think this is going to be one of those things that people are realizing the immense power and the cost savings of using natural gas. So I just put that as a note in here. Just a little thing to throw out there. I think natural gas will become a major focal point in global energy. We simply don't have enough nuclear facilities around the world to just turn on nuclear and make a big impact. Nuclear facilities cost tens of billions of dollars, sometimes $100 billion, and they take anywhere between 5 to 7, sometimes 10 years to build. So that bridge energy, I think, is going to be very heavily focused on natural gas, which is fairly easy to drill and to be able to process into final products. We are in the middle of a very top-heavy market. I've been talking about this forever. I think one thing people aren't watching or paying attention to is how much foreign capital is in the U.S. stock market, which isn't an unusual thing, but it certainly is a threat to the economy. I try to identify threats. In a global trade war with new tariffs being implemented, new taxes, new trade deficits, new trade partners all throughout the world. This is an economic war, and foreign countries having a lot of money in our stock market is nothing new, but it certainly is something to watch where a rug pull could occur in the stock market. If that happens, I think you see gold soar. I think you see the stock market and Bitcoin kind of go down with one another. I think you see Bitcoin rebound massively from that. Not like again, I've called 3 out of the last 0 bear markets. So I've been saying this will happen for 3 years and it hasn't happened yet. Now, at least I acknowledge that the threat is still there for that, very, very much so. And I think people are stocking up for this event because you're watching all these states coming out with digital asset bills in place. Now, that is something I just learned in an interview I'll release later this week with Reed. Is in the financial arena, they're not allowed to use the term crypto or Bitcoin. Digital asset is the only acceptable compliant term. So these are primarily financial people writing these bills. They're digital assets. I think digital assets moving forward are going to mean Bitcoin, stablecoins, meme coins, NFTs, collectibles, things like that. Maybe some of the cryptocurrencies make it through for certain purposes, utility functions. I don't know. I'm not making a guess on that. I'm not a legislator or a regulator. Just going off what I hear, I haven't heard cryptocurrency. I've heard crypto being referred to as stablecoins, Bitcoin, and some of these meme coin collectibles, as well as tokenized real world assets, which I've talked about many times. I think as long as security is there, it's a good idea, but security is really the issue with any of these assets. But you're starting to see more states pile onto these digital stockpiles or reserves. You know, there are specific Bitcoin bills. Even in the digital asset bill, it basically states cryptocurrencies with a market cap of $500 to $750 billion over the last 12 months. There's only one that qualifies for that. There's 2 that could be there. And we don't know. One of them could totally shoot up out of number 15 on that list and become very important. But these are very politically stated things. So you have nation states, you have states discussing this. Nothing has happened yet. I hate the tribalism in crypto. There's Bitcoin guys. Let's just be realistic here. The government is exploring digital assets. That's pretty much where we are. But it is not an exploration phase when it comes to Wall Street and institutions. Goldman Sachs disclosed today they have $2.3 billion in various Bitcoin ETFs. I think right now we're looking at a total of about $27.5 billion between the major financial firms. So these are products that they create that people want to buy, and buying through an ETF is much easier than buying and storing Bitcoin or crypto on a cold wallet. And it's a great introduction. But this is how new products are introduced into the market. So very important you understand that. One thing I'll gladly disagree with the Bitcoin community. I'm a Bitcoiner, but I also am a realist and try to just tell the truth where I can. BlackRock came out today and said that Bitcoin is a risk-off asset, meaning that it doesn't correlate with the markets. That may be the future. But currently Bitcoin is crypto at this point in time. It's got a 61% market share. So 61% of all cryptocurrencies are Bitcoin. It is the dominant gorilla in the room. And more importantly, it is a risk-on asset. It does move with the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ. It has for a very long time. It's starting to break away from that a little bit right now. But that's why I've been always telling people gold, silver, Bitcoin, raw land, oil and gas, trade the VIX. And I think those are still a good strategy. I haven't changed mine. I'm still in the same strategy. But I look at Bitcoin as the risk part of my portfolio at this point in time. I think gold and silver are always good plays. If you're a cautious person, you don't want to lose money, gold and silver is the best place to go. If you want to be part of wealth transformation in the digital asset arena, Bitcoin isn't going anywhere, regardless of all the horror stories and ghost stories you hear all over the world. It is now producing 880 exahash to 1 zeta hash of computing power. To give you an idea of what that is, because people just look at Bitcoin, it's just like everything else. It's not. The Bitcoin network is it will take destroying all of humanity to end the Bitcoin network. This has actually already been mathematically played out. But the Bitcoin network itself is an independent island, nation state on its own from a monetary perspective. Producing 800 to a zeta hash of computing power requires between 16.9 and 29.4 gigawatts of energy based on currency or contracts with power providers or generating off-grid energy. That is equivalent to, depending on the low side, the nation of Poland, and on the high side, the nation of Spain. So there's a reason why Bitcoin gets the attention, because Bitcoin is the most secure network that the world has ever seen, and it protects buying power. So I'll do another breakdown on that, but just understanding from an electrical standpoint, Bitcoin is a nation. It is now somewhere in between the size of Poland and the size of Spain based on energy consumption, which non-Bitcoiners will try to say is not environmentally safe. It's extremely environmentally safe because 64.5% of that energy now comes from renewables, from wind, solar, natural gas. We have a deal up in Knoxville, Tennessee. We're actually extracting CO2 and providing pure ethane energy for 8.35 megawatts of energy. This is the innovation of a real commodity, a real asset to hold and stockpile, one that leverages itself into the real world. Almost all cryptos are run on corporate servers, but Bitcoin by itself, the reason it's getting attention and the reason very few people know about it is because that energy production is done in the most efficient manner on planet Earth, period. So Bitcoin miners out there are actually the innovators in energy consumption and conservation right now, producing high amounts of energy for a low amount of money. This is kind of the lead-in into the era of AI. We are going to have to use these types of techniques that have been built from the ground up in order to be able to stimulate the economy and provide enough energy to be able to power the technologies of the future. So just another place to look at. Do your own research. I'm not here to promote anything to you. I think it's the most fascinating asset I've ever seen, but I also love gold. And gold is right at the right time, guys. It's right at the right time. If it'll give you insight on my perspective on this, I think that gold will have a good run. I called last week. I said we're very soon approaching $3,000 gold. We're at 2920 something today. We will be at $3,000 gold in the next 10 days, pretty assuredly. If the market doesn't short it, that's part of the problem. Is every day billions of dollars are just blindly naked shorted throughout the world, driving the price of gold down. This is a problem with a centralized market like that, where very few people make the entire market. So you'll see a play there around 3,000. I think if we revalue gold, you might see 4, you might see 5. And if spot price continues to move in stagnation to a revaluing, it could go lower. I think one of the things about revaluing gold that people don't really, as someone who owns gold, I want them to revalue gold so the price of gold goes up. But it also exposes the fact that gold is completely centralized. A majority of the gold, about 80% of the gold, is controlled by governments and banks all around the world. And they literally have a magic wand that they can just revalue it at any time. And they use their powers and their trading capabilities to drive the price down so they can accumulate more, which is exactly what's happening in crypto and Bitcoin markets. They're doing the same thing through market makers. Binance, Coinbase, they're selling off reserves, trying to keep the price low, the same way FTX did before they went down. There's a lot of things that are going to come to light in these markets, but I'm really excited about the gold market because I'd love to see $5,000 gold, if that's even a possibility. We don't know. If I do, then I'll take some of my gold and I'll probably buy more Bitcoin with it, and vice versa. If I see a big Bitcoin price and we haven't seen a liquidity event where gold runs, you kind of shift the focus back and forth. And the good news is there's a lot of new payments coming out, a lot of fast payments on the Lightning Network that are coming out right now. So you're seeing a lot of development in this digital world that correlates with the physical world. Now, what most people talk about in that era or that space is that we're going to peg everything to gold and make it digital. Great, you can do that. I'm still going to use Bitcoin because I don't want to have my money frozen. I don't want to have my money censored. And I don't trust any government, including ours, all around the world, to actually have an accurate pegging of gold to digital assets. So until that becomes something that's standardized and completely transparent, where every ounce that's sold is actually shown and verified, I don't think anyone should trust it. Hold physical gold. You'll be able to go take your gold and sell it for an ounce of gold for cash anytime you want. Digitized gold has been around for at least 5 years in Europe. Been a very unsuccessful venture, and I know that this is what the BRICS countries are talking about right now, and it will become a reality over time, but right now we simply don't have the mechanisms in place to verify that if I have $100 billion in gold, that I'm going to have $100 billion in a stable coin backed by that gold. I'm not going to trust a private corporation ever to do that audit, and until the Treasury is cleaned up and completely transparent, I'm not going to trust it there either. Physical gold and Bitcoin will be my choices. You're free to do what you want. All right, let's wrap this up on a little bit of politics, because there are just some crazy things happening right now. I cannot wait to watch Congress defend stealing money from Americans to send money abroad. I think it's going to be one of the most hilarious congressional hearings we ever see. It's also going to be very emotional. You are watching at least a 50-year psyop be broken day by day, and the people who haven't realized that they're being stolen from by the government, they're going to fight tooth and nail because the matrix is so comfortable for them. So there's going to be this big emotional run in the next year that's going to cause a lot of issues for a lot of people, but in the end, it's going to be great. Everything will be good. I think it's important that we're starting to, Elon was just with Trump in the Oval Office and his son, Little X, and they were talking about the problems that they've already found at USAID. One of them is very, very easy to describe. Samantha Powell, she is the head of the USAID. Her net worth since 2021 has increased $24 million despite making $180,000 a year. And Elon brought that up. He's like, how do so many bureaucrats around this country, how are they worth tens of millions of dollars on a $200,000 a year salary? This is a question we've all had for a very long time, and it's now boiling to the surface. So I would expect to see what we're seeing in the gold market correlating with these people who actually extort money from our own government. Where do you think they've been hiding it? They've been hiding it in hard assets overseas. You think this run on the COMEX and the gold market is just totally organic? I do not. I think this is a lot of people who took a lot of money, who sent it to Europe to hide it and protect it and claim it on their net worth here to tell their friends, that are starting to realize that the entire scam is up and they're withdrawing their funds. So I think what we're watching right now in the gold market is a panic. It's these people who've said, oh, I have physical gold over in London. Nobody can touch it. I'm totally safe, no matter how much I've extorted from the United States. And this is just theory, by the way. I don't have any knowledge of this. But it seems to be awfully correlated to USAID and then a gold run happening in London. I bet that there are a lot of people who made millions of dollars off our own sweat and blood and tears in this country that are trying to pull their physical assets out so they can transport them somewhere else and keep their money hidden. This is just the tip of the iceberg. When we start seeing that the market doesn't even have enough gold for that, that's when you start seeing a big gold run coming from the East. The Eastern countries, Europe, China, India, these countries are very heavy on precious metals. They are part of their culture. They're not part of ours. So this gold run coming with assets being shipped to the United States, I don't believe that that's coincidence. I believe that those are corrupt politicians and bureaucrats that are trying to get their gold and either leave the country or bury it in the backyard. I have no idea. I'm just making a guess here. But I think it's highly logical to correlate those two things together. So keep an eye on the gold market over the next year and see what happens, because if a true gold run happens, it will come from the East. It will come from Russia, China, India, Taiwan, some of these other nations that have very wealthy people that will want to pull their money out of the gold markets, and the gold markets simply don't have them. So Samantha Powell, that's a big one. $100 billion a year is being sent out in payments to unverified people who have no U.S. documentation. Zero documentation of being U.S., $100 billion a year. FEMA, they just clawed back $59 million that FEMA was spending on illegal aliens, putting them up at high-end hotels owned by Pakistanis, by the way. Those hotels were not owned by Americans. That is another form of money laundering. And we're starting to see Trump talking about ending FEMA. If you haven't done the deep rabbit hole on FEMA, I suggest you do, because it was not created to save us during emergency. It was created for a much darker purpose that each of you should run a rabbit hole on. One of the blessings that we're seeing from USAID is through the International Organization of Migration, the IOM. And I interviewed Michael Yan and Ann Vandersteel when they were in the Panama Canal, and IOM was a huge nonprofit or a huge NGO. They got all their money from the government, primarily from USAID. Now they just announced that they're laying off 3,000 people. That is 3,000 people that are being financed by an NGO who gets tax benefits and money from the US government to bring illegals into our country. So this is a really big point for me. I think that once you shut down these NGOs that are doing all the migration work, and I've talked about this before, here's how illegal migration works and how you change and warp a nation into a whole tyrannical state. You start a war overseas, you kill a bunch of people, you get a bunch of NGOs to take the refugees halfway across the world, you send them up through the southern border, you give them a new identity, you give them a job, they steal a job from an American, they ruin the culture, and then you have a totally different country with no money. That's literally the process we've been in for about 75 years in this country, really since World War II. And organizations like IOM, who I've seen at airports twice, I've seen illegals walking around with bags that say IOM on them. They are now laying off 3,000 people. That's 3,000 people less who will be bringing kids into this country and illegals into this country. Ryan Matta on X actually revealed that $797 million went from USAID to Guatemala, which has been responsible for the kidnapping and trafficking of 190,000 children across the border. And these are dark topics that the world needs to talk about. Child trafficking throughout the world, especially in this country, is the plague. That is the plague of modern society. There are a lot of evil people who make a lot of money doing it, and it just deteriorates the soul of a nation, knowing that we can't even protect our weakest. So thank you to Ryan for exposing that. Then we can walk into Gaza. This whole scenario with Israel and Hamas. I want to embed some logic here because I'm pro-peace. Period. I have a very strong stance. You can go on Rumble and see my stance biblically on this whole thing. But at the end of the day, we are destroying a city because of a street gang. So I keep hearing that the purpose of killing right now 200,000 people in Gaza, about 45 or 50,000 of those are children, innocent children who never had a backpack bomb on them in their life. The reasoning behind it is we have to destroy all of Palestine to get rid of Hamas. It's Hamas. Well, in America, we have a plague of street gangs. It's really no different. They're terrorists in the same vein. They're just not launching missiles that they're getting from funding from Israel to Hamas, which is a provable financial trail. But is this the way peace operates? That because there's a gang that's causing you problems, you just level the whole city? Is that how we handled the mafia in New York? Did we just blow up New York, kill them all, and sort it out later? These are very big issues. This is one thing that with Donald Trump, the finances or the economy will be a big thing, and how he handles what's happening in the Middle East will be another one. And I think he's doing everything that's right. So I'm giving you this prelude to Gaza because I think it's actually Trump's only option. So he has announced that we are going to come in and take over the Gaza Strip, and Netanyahu looked very surprised there. Now, Trump has very strong Zionist Israel ties. There's no way around that. I'm not saying it's a good or bad thing because oftentimes you'll see people who belong to a group who don't agree with what the group is doing and want to make a change, and I certainly see that in him. But at the same time, we have this stigma of, Gaza or Palestine and Israel haven't gotten along ever, which actually isn't true until Israel was recreated. They all lived in that same region pre-1948 in relative peace for hundreds of years. And now we have Trump saying, we're going to take over the Gaza Strip. We're going to get all the Palestinians out. We're going to move them to Georgia, Jordan, and Egypt, and some of these other places. Then we're going to repair it, and we're going to parse it off and sell it and make a profit. To me, this was offensive when I first heard it. And this is why I don't react to things right off the bat. I generally take 48 hours, sit on things, and see what it might really mean. To be frank with you, having watched ceasefire after ceasefire after ceasefire get broken on both sides, primarily really from Israel, but both sides have broken ceasefires, I don't know that there's another option to save that region of the world and save those people. I don't know that Trump has another card to play there. The Israelis had a meeting today, and they're already saying that we now have a new rule in there. If one prisoner is harmed, then Trump will allow them to annex 5% of Palestine. And the Israelis immediately jumped on that and starting putting new troops around the border and sending in people into refugees areas. This is a provocation of war, no matter how you look at it. I don't care if you support Israel or hate Israel. I just call balls and strikes. And the balls and strikes that I can call in this scenario is that Israel is definitely an aggressor. Hamas is an aggressor, but they're funded by Israel. And this is a great excuse to draw us into a greater war to build a greater Israel, which Trump appears to be doing. And many may get upset with that and disagree with it. It's from abroad what I think he's doing, or could be accused of doing. However, after sitting on it for a week, I started to realize that the only way you're actually going to save these people's lives is to get them out of there, because Israel is not going to stop until it's completely leveled. Let them level it. Let them rebuild it. The problem I have is, will the Palestinians be allowed to be back in their homeland? Both of those two have a claim to the land, depending on the part of the land that you're in. And it's a deeper discussion that we all need to talk about, because I think that, to be honest with you, you could look at there's a lot of grifting happening, right? We have a $7 billion Trump meme coin. We've got all this other stuff happening. Now we have Jared Kushner and his father getting involved in the rebuilding of Palestine, which is absolutely part of a greater Israel plan. But let's let it play out. A lot of people want to jump on this and make an accusation and call Trump a grifter, or call Trump a traitor, or call Trump a savior. I think we all need to take a second and step back here. We're Americans. We really have no idea what's happening there. All we have is social media videos and reports that are written by authors in journals we don't know. And I think that they do have a much better idea as to what's happening there. And I think that we are at a point right now where there's so much bloodlust in the region that I don't think Israel would stop until every Palestinian is dead. I really don't think so. I think that what Trump is doing is a last-ditch effort to save these people's lives, to rebuild the region, and we will see what he does with this. Like, give everything time. Let it develop. It upsets me tremendously, this topic, but I also have learned very much over the last 5 years to take a step back, let things develop. I'm not trying to be the guy who called it first. I have no interest in that. I want to be the guy who called it right. And I think that if we take a step back and watch what he does over the coming years, that we will get a better feeling as to whether or not this is a Israel first model, or if this is a peace first model, creating an America first model. We don't know yet. I'm not going to jump to conclusions. And I think that all of this is tied together in every possible way with what's happening with Kash Patel, Tulsi Gabbard, and RFK Jr. not being already appointed. Tulsi's gotten by the first hurdle. I think we'll see them be fully confirmed this week. And I think we will see Senator Luna, or Congressman Luna, head up a committee that's going to basically declass 9/11, JFK, RFK, the Epstein files, MLK, COVID, and this will be the largest declass in human history if it happens. We will see massive congressional pushback on this. But I think if that does happen, what we will see is that Israel has been involved with all of those scenarios heavily. And if that happens, it changes the stance on Gaza and Palestine and Israel from Trump's perspective. So give Trump a little bit of time. Let this thing develop. Don't jump to a conclusion that he's just selling off the land to Jared Kushner and his dad to create high-end condos for more Israelis to have in a greater Israel expanded area. Trump is a master at putting things out in the spotlight, letting people figure out what it is, and then staking your claim. Voice your opinion. If you agree or don't agree, you have the right as an American. You have a First Amendment right to disagree with anything. And you also have an obligation to be able to speak what's on your mind to help the country become a better place. I think what we will find out is there has been heavy Israeli involvement with the Mossad and the CIA since its inception. They were conceived all around the same period of time, the 1947, 1948 period. And I think that you will see over the coming months, years, however long it takes for this declass, if they actually do an unredacted declassification of 9/11, JFK, RFK, Epstein, MLK, and COVID, I think that the story will tell itself in the end, and then proper measures will be taken. But until that proof is put out directly in front of the world, we're still going to live in this, Zionist, divisive factions of America, ones that believe that Israel should be taken care of above all and America should be taken care of above all. I think we give these things time to play out. We sit on the sidelines for a little bit. We continue to voice our disagreements or our agreements with things. We continue to have calm, rational, adult conversations about any topic. One thing that's certain for me that I can see at this point in time is that divide and conquer, the old Roman strategy of divide and conquer, is the most successful war tactic in the history of mankind. And mankind, especially in the United States, doesn't need more areas to be divided about. We don't need to start arguing about Gaza right now because we have no idea what's going to happen. You see tribalism everywhere. You see it in Democrat, Republican, vax, no vax, crypto, Bitcoin. I mean, everything has this tribal, divisive nature. And the fact of the matter is it doesn't matter who's in office ever. It has never mattered. What does matter is what the American people will or will not tolerate and the future that we want to build. And if we continue to just be fans that sit in the arena and watch the powers that be play the game, we're always going to be left out, even if Trump's in office. So let's take this next 3.5 years, 4 years with Donald Trump, and let's find a way to create unity between all the different factions of America to be able to come to a consensus as to what we should or shouldn't do as a nation and vote that way accordingly in the future, if voting matters. Voting doesn't actually matter a whole lot right now. So there's a lot of problems to correct right now. I'm glad that our government is focused in on us. I wish he would shut down funding for Ukraine and for Israel, because Ukraine, on the other hand, also is a major problem. One of Zelensky's offshore companies just bought Adolf Hitler's Eagle Nest home in the Bavarian mountains for $14.5 million. There has been an increase of 10.8% in millionaires in Ukraine. Ukraine, now that we've pulled the plug on the money, they're all of a sudden, oh, let's figure out a way to swap land with Russia. Give these policies that Trump is implementing. They are very iron fist policies. They are very much needed in a soft world filled with soft men. We have a strong man coming in with an iron fist, and the things that he is doing right now, don't think of them as one-to-one. Think of them as one-to-many. Every action that he is doing right now will uncover all types of things for the American people to see the truth. And I think Donald Trump listens to his constituents. And if we disagree with what he's doing with enough proof in our hands, I think he backs away from it. So that's really what I've got for you this week here. I won't be on until next Monday, maybe this weekend. I've got a couple interviews coming out. I think you'll love the interview with Reed out of Wyoming, Reed Rasser. It's a great interview. He ran for Senate, and he's a financial guy, so we're talking about tariffs and things like that. I think you'll enjoy some of the interviews we have coming out on that series over there. But I won't be live here again doing this monologue for at least another 6 days. I'll try to get one done on Monday, maybe on Tuesday too. Trying to step this up quite a bit, but I run a business and I'm very busy with that right now. And that's my primary focus, is taking care of my family. So I was accused by someone in an interview that I make money spreading information. I don't make any money doing this at all. I make zero money. Actually, I make negative money because I pay people to help me with this because I don't have time to do it on my own. I do this because I love you all. I do this because I love this country. And I think that just a grounded approach to understanding basic information, and financial is kind of my niche, really is needed in this country. So next week I will get very heavy-handed in financial, dumbing down finances so that people understand what's happening, understanding reverse repos and all these other big words that we use in economics. I really want to get into that education phase. So if you follow me on Telegram or Twitter, feel free to post in my Telegram chat or DM me on Twitter topics that you'd like me to explain and make it simple for you. We are approaching a huge transition in finances where most of traditional finance information will be null and void in the next 5 to 10 years. And I want to make sure that we're all ahead of the game a little bit, and that we have a sounding board of reason to be able to explain the complexities of the market that we're in and the market we're transitioning to, because the complexities are going to paralyze many people. So it's been great talking with you all tonight. Thank you all for coming here tonight. I look forward to doing this next week and trying to get on 2 to 3 times next week if travel permits that. We have a lot of busy stuff going on with the company right now, but really looking forward to it. And again, help me help you. Tell me the things that I'm discussing or posting online that you don't understand. I get comments a lot. Explain this to me like a third grader. And it's not a bad thing. Please say that. Please ask. I ask people that all the time for things that I don't understand. So when those comments come out, I try to put them in a notebook and say, all right, I need to explain this to people so they understand what it is, so they know what I'm saying, but more importantly, that they have the information for their own life and their own livelihood. So I really want to get on that dumbing down of complex things for you next week. And I'd love to have your help in that. So comments on this video, Twitter, Telegram, those are the only 2 places I am. I'm Critical Rice Theory on Telegram. I'm EA_Rice on Twitter, and the Rice Report on Twitter. Anything other than that is not me. That is someone else impersonating me, and it happens all the time. Or you can reach out to me directly in the comments here. I try to check those a couple times a week. I really don't have a whole lot of time to. But I do this for free. I do this for all of you guys, and I enjoy doing it. So if I can help you with anything, please let me know. But until next week, I am Eric Rice. This is the Rice Report. God bless you. God bless this country. Hope you all have a great week, and look forward to more winning in this country. And we'll see you next time. Have a good one, everybody.